welcome to Fixing Disney Star Wars. Thanks for joining us on our final episode of our limited series of things we like about the Disney Star Wars trilogy. This week's episode focuses on Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Whether you like or hate the film, we think there's some pretty interesting ideas presented here, and even if they aren't explored as fleshed out as we'd like them to be. Today, we'll present to you what we find to be the best parts about the film, but please do tell us what you liked most about The Rise of Skywalker in the comments below. If you're a fan of our work, please consider joining our Subscribe Star. Memberships start at as little as $1 a month, and each tier has exclusive perks like seeing this video early before it goes live on YouTube, getting exclusive looks at Rey's new lightsaber for the film, more in-depth commentary, first looks at our new VFX, and more. The link is in the description if you're interested. 100% of all proceeds from our Subscribe Star go to these edits, and we keep absolutely nothing. Now, with the introduction out of the way, let's get to it. It was a good choice for JJ to open the film with Mustafar, even if it isn't immediately known that the planet here is in fact Mustafar. The last time we saw the planet on screen was in Revenge of the Sith and Rogue One, and apparently the planet has been cooling down and healing since the events of those films. Though this film doesn't show any flowing lava or any locations from those films really, it's still slightly nostalgic seeing that big red ball suspended in space. Sources separate from the film, like novelization, visual guides, and comics, state that the location of this sequence actually takes place in the ruins of Darth Vader's castle, but this isn't actually expressed in this film. To remedy this, we're creating a whole new visual effects scene where we'll see Kylo Ren flying through the atmosphere of Mustafar, and he'll be escorted by a pair of First Order TIE fighters. And we'll also see a flyby of the remains of Darth Vader's castle. Our goal here is to make it more obvious that this planet is Mustafar, and that the sequence takes place in the ruins of Darth Vader's castle. There's a lot of information in this film that isn't included in the film itself, so edits like this are our way to better convey information like that to the viewer. Though we don't necessarily agree with the return of Palpatine in this film, it's still nice to see Ian McDiarmid returning for the role. Disney could have casted someone else potentially, so if Palpatine has to return, then it's good that Ian dons the black robes once more. And he chews the scenery and dialogue here as much as he did in the previous films, and though we wish that Palpatine hadn't been brought back, it's still nostalgic in a way to see him on screen again being the big bad to close out this last film in the sequel trilogy. This small sequence is actually a bit upsetting because, for just a brief moment, there's a hint of greatness for this film. Rey's snap at Poe when she says, "You know what you are? You're difficult. You're a difficult man," and Poe's ensuing body language, and the response is almost Han and Leia level great. If Rey and Poe had continued to be at each other's throats for the duration of this film, it would have firstly better established their relationship by showing how in the years since The Last Jedi they do not get along, and also it would have allowed that conflict to be a major portion of this film, thus creating a dynamic among the characters that forces Finn to side with either Rey or Poe. The film has no conflict, really, between the three main leads, and this lack of conflict makes them seem less human and less relatable. Rey, Finn, and Poe get along swimmingly well for the majority of the film, with the exception of this small scene. The film would have been much better to explore this interpersonal conflict, but sadly it simply leaves it here, never to be explored further. The concept of a Force dyad is interesting on paper. Two people sharing a unique connection within the Force that allows them to transfer items through the Force and complete Force Skype calls. In our version of The Last Jedi, we have removed the idea that Snoke bridged the minds of Rey and Kylo, instead showing this unique form of communication to be a result of their dyad status in the Force. Though this concept isn't explored in the film to its full potential, what we do see is impressive, and it makes us wonder just what other unique Force abilities still remain to be discovered in this galaxy far, far away. In a series where the main protagonist is shown to have essentially no weakness whatsoever, it was nice to see the writers attempt to give Rey a moment of failure by allowing her anger to take over. The apparent resulting aftermath of Rey killing Chewbacca was an inspired one, and had the film not pulled a gotcha by showing Chewie to be alive and well later on, this loss would have greatly impacted Rey and made her actions and the consequences thereof feel more real and dangerous. But unfortunately, this film is full of false sacrifices and gotcha moments that undermine any real emotion in the film. Still, with such a lack of character development from the previous two films, the filmmaker's attempt at giving Rey some sort of growth here is greatly welcomed, and though there's very little growth for her during the rest of the film, we'll take what we can get. Arguably the best character to emerge from the Disney sequel trilogy, this little guy simply steals the show in our opinion. The puppeteering is top-notch, as is his voice work, and although he has very little time on screen, his personality lights up the film and the scenes that he is in, and he is a much welcomed addition to the Star Wars canon. Though there is no real common sense reason for the Death Star wreckage to be so intact, it's hard to deny the striking visuals of this sequence. Two warriors battling on the ruins of the Death Star surrounded by gigantic graves crashing all around. Plus, this sequence is an homage of sorts to the scene on Mustafar between Anakin and Obi-Wan, but instead of hot lava, it's cold water, and like George Lucas has said a number of times before, these two sequences considered together, they're like poetry. They rhyme. Seeing General Pride kneel down in front of the Emperor's hologram was great to see from a visual standpoint, as it brings back to memory a similar scene in The Empire Strikes Back. J.J. Abrams seems to relish in creating homages to earlier scenes in the series of these films, and many like this scene are certainly welcome, even if only because it serves as a trigger of feelings of nostalgia for the original films. Seeing Luke Skywalker as he should have been in The Last Jedi was a welcome surprise for fans who loathed his appearance in the previous film. The return of his positivity was lovely to see, as well as the scene where he lifts his X-Wing out of the sea. It shows that Luke has truly come full circle in his training, and he is the Jedi Master we all knew he would be. Also nicely handled is the cutscene with Luke and Leia's training on the Force moon of Endor. And the raising of his X-Wing was also respectfully done and showed that Luke was no longer hindered by a lack of faith in himself or the Force. After the events of The Last Jedi, we were really hoping to see Ben go full dark side and become this film's big bad. But instead, we have Palpatine, which meant that filmmakers had to figure out an option with Ben. What could they do? And though a dark side Ben going all in would have been more interesting in our opinion, the way the filmmakers brought Ben to the light was still well done. We would have loved to see Anakin Skywalker as the voice of reason to Ben after the fight on the Death Star, but the use of Han does give closure to a scene that we see at the end of The Force Awakens. And with the various directions that they could have gone with Ben, the final choice was probably the least inoffensive to the fanbase. Though there was no reason to change Korriban to Exegol, Disney decided to do so anyway. And the resulting homeworld of the Sith we got to see on screen was actually quite impressive, visually anyway. The planet's quite stunning. There's towering statues, there's a giant floating cube, and there's a seemingly endless lightning storm, and it all just works very well. Though we disagree with the reason the planet had to be featured in the film in the first place, which was Palpatine's return, it still does a great job of providing an in-canon version of Korriban, and it looks great. The last time we saw this environment on film on the big screen was at the tail end of Revenge of the Sith, so it's been about a good 15 years. Though it is now essentially derelict, seeing the same location where the Skywalker saga began about 40 years ago is still a wonderful sight to behold, even if Rey is trying to take the legacy of its most famous resident for herself. Well, that'll do it for the things that we like about The Rise of Skywalker. What did you enjoy most about this film? And what did you find problematic? Please, let us know in the comments. And thank you for watching. And until next time, may the Force be with you.